First off, I'm living very rural, in a small village with maybe 10 to 15 houses, but close to the highway, and also about 10 minutes away from the town. If you cross the street, it just takes you about 10-minute walk to reach the forest. On Christmas Day in the afternoon, my partner and I decided to go for a little walk as we were really stuffed from all the food. It was about 5 p.m. and already dark when we left, and we had a big flashlight with us, and I also took my camera and my flash as I love taking pictures of nature at night. We decided to walk on a little country road towards the forest and then turn right, following a small graveled cycle track close to the forest border. In the middle part of the track, you have to walk through a small bit of forest. It's rather dark and the trees are very high and quite dense. When we entered, I saw our flashlight reflecting on something and recognized a car being parked there on the side of the track, close to the trees. This struck me as odd, as cars are not allowed to drive there and the path is very narrow and hidden, so I was a bit cautious. My partner pointed at the light inside of the car and it seemed to be empty. I also noticed the windows were frozen, so it must have been parked there for a while. A bit in front of the car, I spotted a tree with an intriguing structure, and I asked my partner to point the flashlight towards it, so I could focus better. After I took a few images, my partner told me, there's something standing between us in the middle of the road, and he's looking at us. Nobody was following us the whole way. I kept looking around and behind us occasionally, because at this time in the evening, we're close to the border of the forest here, and there are boars sometimes. Indeed, there was a man standing behind us. He wasn't saying anything, just standing there and facing us. At first, I thought he might have been startled, as it may seem a bit weird if someone's just taking photos around your car. I decided to get up and confront him from a distance, explaining to him that I was just taking photos of that tree. He didn't react and still just stood there. I then went on to ask him if he needed some light, and he replied that it wasn't necessary. It was odd, but I was still calm, sure about being their normal explanation for this behavior. Nonetheless, my partner and I decided to just get out of there and follow the path leading to the next village. I remembered the letters on his license plates and Googled it, and it turned out he was from a city about 6 hours away. Mind you, the country I live in is in a very strict lockdown right now. After we reached the first lantern of the next village, we looked back and observed the car driving a bit out of the forest, turning around and going back inside. I was able to see that he parked there again and turned the lights off. He didn't leave the forest. We then went home on a much longer way than initially intended, as I didn't want to go back there for obvious reasons. Our flashlight battery died on the way and my phone battery was low, so I didn't want to call the police, but called them as soon as I arrived home and gave them all the details. I think I was very lucky to have my partner, the camera, and the bright light with me. I don't want to imagine what could have happened if I was alone. There's a lot that happened within our family before this event, so let me explain. My mom's brother, who for the sake of the story I'll call Clark, has been married to this woman for over 20 years now, and they have one child together. Growing up, I had always been told that my aunt was a little bit off and was instructed by my mother to stay clear of her if I had the chance. She seemed pretty normal to me until I was around 10, and she started harassing my mother and my grandparents. She would hit on my grandfather and show up to their house unannounced, and would occasionally try to start fights. We had to block her on all our phones, and my uncle was told that she is no longer allowed on ours or our grandparents' property. Years had gone by without much issue towards us, but for the past few years she has been mentally abusing my uncle along with my cousin. And once in a fit of rage, she peed on the floor in front of my cousin. Yes, full on squatted and relieved herself. My cousin has since moved out. With all the background information out of the way, let's get to the main story. It was Christmas Eve a year ago, and as for tradition, we were having dinner at my grandparents' house. It was my grandparents, mom, dad, brother, uncle, cousin, and their dog Holly. We're at the dinner table, which is in view of the front porch windows, when we hear the doorbell ring furiously and the door being pounded on. As we looked over at the windows, who do we see? Her. My uncle gets up and goes outside to talk to her. From the table, we can hear a bit of yelling, and my uncle opens the door to come back in when all of a sudden, she grabs the dog and threatens to take it away if my uncle didn't give her money. At this point, my parents are outside watching all this along with a few neighbors. My uncle gets in the car with her, and before he gets to drive, she yells, "What are you looking at? I'm beautiful. And God loves me." Then she gets in the car and speeds off. So we are all at the windows, stunned and confused. All the while, my cousin is texting his father to make sure she's okay. He lets us know that he is and that he's going to an ATM to get her some money so they would leave her alone. About an hour or so later, my uncle gets back with the dog and tells us that she was basically holding him hostage because he didn't give her enough money. But finally, with a bit of bribing, she brought him back, and I haven't seen her since. The rest of the night obviously had a lot of tension, and I watched the road behind us all the way home, scared that she was following us. Since that incident, things have escalated at their house. We have found out that she's doing drugs and has been cheating on my uncle for a while now. For those asking why we didn't call the cops, he told us not to. I don't know why, but he hasn't done much about her except tell her he wants a divorce, but nothing has come of that. On Christmas, I was at my dad's with some of my siblings. We celebrated Christmas, and then after dinner, my dad headed off to be with his girlfriend at her apartment. Left in the house were my 16-year-old uncle, my 16-year-old brother, and me, who was 15, and the youngest, who was a toddler. I woke up early the next morning, the day after Christmas, and sat on the floor beside an outlet on my tablet. Everyone else was still sleeping, and then I heard banging on the back door. I thought it was my dad coming back, but the banging got louder and went on for too long. For lack of a better term, I disassociated, didn't know what to do, and couldn't move until I heard the back door break. I had been paranoid about home invasion due to our area in the city before, but I had no idea what to do and just stood there in shock. I put down my tablet and picked up a nearby flashlight. I think to throw at whoever broke in. When the back door had given out, I heard him go quickly through the downstairs, stomp up the stairs, and then he was right outside of the door of the room I was in. The man opened the door, looked left and then right, where he saw me sitting on the floor, beside the outlet less than 3 feet away from him. He was taller than my dad and wore completely black and a ski mask. He held a big rusty crowbar that had a blue handle. He was wide and looked on the older side. I took a small breath and screamed louder than I ever had, and held it for at least 20 seconds. Once I screamed, he screamed a bit too, and then ran downstairs and out of the house. I went to the top of the staircase after he was already down and out the hallway, and I yelled, "Please leave." as loud as I had screamed less than a second before. Looking back, asking a house invader to leave is useless, because he was already leaving. And also because he broke in. But I wasn't thinking my best. My screaming woke up my uncle and my older brother. I wasn't wearing pants, so I put pants on quicker than I ever have, while telling my older brother that just happened, and he was half awake and confused. I ran downstairs and my uncle had just come from his room in the basement. I quickly told him someone had broke in, and left after I screamed. He already had a knife and told me to grab one too. I did, and after making sure the robber had left the house and checking quickly on the toddler who was somehow still sleeping. My uncle told me to guard the back door and stab anyone who comes through while he checked the area outside to see if the robber was gone or where he went. I held the knife and stood beside the broken back door, knowing if someone came back, I couldn't do anything, as I have never fought, and I'm a child holding a kitchen knife. So I just held the knife in hopes that they wouldn't come back, and they didn't. My uncle came back and said they must have had a driver since no way he could get away that fast on foot. None of us had phones, so my older brother called my dad over Instagram on a tablet to tell him what happened. We explained what happened, and when Dad was 10 minutes away via car and he hung up. While we all sat and waited for my dad, we talked and realized this was likely all planned. The invader came in when there was no car in the driveway, and after entering he ran directly upstairs. He went directly for my dad's room, where me and my older brother were. My dad collects valuable shoes and has some expensive watches he keeps in his closet, and only someone who's friends with my dad who had been in the house before could have done it and knew the right place to go. When my dad came back, he asked me over and over about how the intruder looked, and I told him again and again, well, he and my uncle tried to think of which friend it could have been. I was the only one who saw the guy, and he had been less than 3 feet away from me. I was in direct physical danger from some stranger I had never met. We didn't call the cops, as the police in our area are known for being more than unhelpful. As Christmas is getting closer again, I'm worried about being back there around the same time the person broke in. I've had a harder time sleeping, and I've been more paranoid. I understand I was and am very, very lucky that I wasn't hurt and all we got was a broken back door. But I still honestly hate the person who broke in. I hope wherever he is, he's not doing well.